got fired after turning a failing branch into a $10 million success. My name is Thomas Lang, and I'd spent most of my working life believing that results speak for themselves, that if you work hard, fix what's broken, and deliver success, people will see that, respect it, reward it. That's what I believed until I was told I was no longer needed, 3 months after turning the company's worst-performing branch into their golden goose. Let me take you back to where it started. The branch I was sent to was dying. No clear structure, low morale, clients leaving, and revenue falling for the 3rd year in a row. It had become a punchline internally. When I first walked through the doors, it was like everyone had already given up. I didn't blame them. Nobody had stepped up to fix it. For years, upper management rotated different supervisors through that office like a revolving door. No consistency, no strategy, no trust. So when I was asked to relocate and stabilize things, I didn't jump at the chance. I asked questions. What resources would I have? What authority? Who would have my back if I made tough decisions? I didn't get clear answers, but I accepted the challenge anyway. Not because I was trying to impress anyone, but because I knew I could make it work if they gave me even a little room to operate. It took months. Quiet changes at first. I didn't walk in with a clipboard and a speech. I listened. I watched how things moved or didn't. People were guarded. They assumed I was temporary, just like the others. I didn't argue. I just worked. I fixed systems, created accountability without shame, and made sure people started getting recognized for results instead of politics. The first thing I did was review the client list. I noticed right away that the top 10 clients had all been handled by 3 different account managers in the last 18 months. No wonder they didn't trust us. So I called each one myself. Not with a sales pitch, just to introduce myself and ask what they needed that they weren't getting. That was a turning point. I didn't promise them the moon. I told them I would call back in 30 days with a plan, and if they didn't see progress, I'd personally help them transition elsewhere. That got their attention. Internally, I started making slow but deliberate changes. I didn't fire anyone, but I did restructure the team based on strengths, not titles. One guy who'd been sidelined for years, because he wasn't manager material, turned out to be our sharpest thinker when it came to logistics. I put him in charge of reworking the branch's scheduling system. In 3 weeks, efficiency improved so much that even corporate noticed. They assumed it came from headquarters. I never corrected them. Then there was the budget, or lack of one. Every month was a scramble. I found small areas to recover costs, software licenses no one was using, maintenance contracts we didn't need, unnecessary printing. Within a quarter, we had freed up enough money to fund a client retention initiative that had been shelved for years. I didn't ask permission. I just made the numbers work. By the 2nd quarter, client churn slowed. By the 3rd, we were growing. Not in huge, flashy ways, but steadily, predictably. The kind of growth that doesn't make headlines but pays bills and earns trust. Then something strange started happening. People at corporate began reaching out, not to congratulate, but to ask what I was doing. Carefully worded emails, occasional drop-ins, a lot of "we're just here to support you" type messages. I didn't think much of it at first, but then I noticed that some of my reports were being requested directly by the regional VP, and my weekly updates were being repackaged and shared at meetings I wasn't invited to. Still, I said nothing. I figured if the ideas were good enough to spread, fine, let them. I wasn't chasing credit, I just wanted the branch to survive. But then came the review cycle. Our numbers were the best they'd been in 5 years. Revenue had topped $10.3 million, which was 380% growth from the same quarter 2 years prior. We had become the second most profitable branch in the region. I submitted my report and expected, at the very least, a constructive conversation. Instead, I got silence. 2 weeks passed. Then I was called to headquarters for a discussion about the future. The email was vague, but I didn't think much of it. I brought my reports, my notes, client feedback, even a few testimonials from our vendors. I thought maybe they were thinking of using our model elsewhere, or maybe finally investing more in what we'd built. What I walked into was very different. There were 3 people in the room. Not one of them had ever visited our branch. Not one had spoken to my team, and the tone was set within the first 30 seconds. Words like realignment and strategic restructuring were tossed around. Then came the line I'll never forget. Your position is being eliminated, effective immediately. We appreciate your service. No warning, no explanation beyond vague strategy talk. Just a prepared packet, a signed letter, and a request to clear out by Friday. I didn't argue, I didn't ask why, not out loud, but inside I knew exactly what had happened. Someone had taken the credit. Someone wanted the results without the person who delivered them. I had become inconvenient. I had done too much, too visibly, too independently. I walked out without saying a word, took the train home, sat with it. That night, 3 senior clients called me, not because I had told them anything, but because they had already heard the news, and they weren't happy. One of them said, "So they pushed out the only person who ever listened." Another asked me where I'd be going next. They weren't interested in the company. They were interested in the person they trusted. That's when I realized they had made a mistake they couldn't walk back, and I hadn't even made my next move yet. The panic didn't start with a press release. It started with silence. Not from me, but from the clients. Some of our longest-standing accounts went quiet after the news broke. They weren't responding to internal follow-ups. They delayed meetings. One even stopped payment on a renewal until someone explained what happened with Thomas. I hadn't posted anything. I hadn't said a word publicly. But clients talk, vendors talk. And people notice when someone who took a broken branch and turned it into a $10 million engine disappears without a trace. By the end of that week, I got my first call from inside. A former colleague, someone I respected, reached out privately. He said, "They're scrambling." They didn't expect this to blow back. Apparently, corporate had announced a new strategic oversight structure that would replace my role, but the team on the ground didn't buy it. Clients were demanding answers, and the people I had worked with for 2 years were left out of the loop entirely. They were expected to manage the fallout without the one person who had built trust. One manager, who'd once been labeled a liability, was now being asked to present quarterly projections to executives. She hadn't even been briefed on the new plan. She texted me late that night and said, "It feels like they thought you were just a placeholder, like they never expected you to actually fix it." That was when I understood something clearly. They weren't just erasing me. They were pretending the turnaround had happened on its own, as if the numbers improved in a vacuum, not because of late nights, hard decisions, and a team that had finally started to believe in something again. I didn't take to social media. I didn't file a complaint. That's not my way. But I did answer the phone when a client asked to meet over coffee. He was polite but direct. "What happened?" he asked. I told him the truth, that I'd been let go without explanation, and that I had nothing bad to say about the company, but I wouldn't be returning. He nodded. Then he leaned in. "They're in trouble. You know that, right?" I didn't know, not yet, but over the next month it became obvious. Revenue dipped. Nothing dramatic, just enough to make the regionals nervous. Then 2 of our top accounts moved their contracts elsewhere, quietly. When asked why, they didn't elaborate. They just said the relationship had changed. Then came the internal shuffle. The person they assigned to oversee operations at the branch had no background with the team, no history with the clients. A numbers guy, polished, sharp, and disconnected from the reality on the ground. He issued sweeping directives that didn't align with how the team actually worked. Morale dipped almost overnight. I heard from a former assistant manager who said she had requested a meeting to clarify a new policy and was told, "It's not your role to question strategy." That was the same person who had once saved us from losing a six-figure client by flagging a tiny error in a shipment schedule. Now she was being told to stay in her lane. The culture we had built was unraveling. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet. I didn't interfere, but I paid attention. I started getting messages from former vendors, partners, even competitors. One asked if I was consulting now. Another said they'd heard I was between roles and would love to talk if I had time. And then I got the message that changed everything. An executive from a mid-sized firm I'd met once at a regional conference reached out and said, "I don't know what happened over there, but we've been watching." That kind of turnaround doesn't happen by accident. He wasn't offering a job. He was offering something better, the chance to build something new. Not just another job title or the corner office, a chance to shape a culture from the ground up. I told him I'd think about it. Not because I was hesitant, just because I wasn't going to jump back into anything for the sake of optics. Meanwhile, the messages from my old company kept trickling in. Not to me directly, but to others. My name kept coming up in meetings. Someone at a board session reportedly asked, "Who made the original decision to remove Thomas?" I wasn't in the room, but I heard about it within 48 hours. Their panic was real now. You could see it in the numbers. But more than that, you could hear it in the way they talked, no longer with confidence but with justification, trying to explain why a branch that had become a $10 million asset was suddenly struggling again. Why clients were leaving without complaint. Why the people they'd overlooked were quitting without another job lined up. Then I got the call, not from HR, not from anyone who had been part of the termination decision. It was someone higher. A quiet voice I hadn't heard from in 2 years. "Just checking in," he said. I knew what that meant. He wanted to know if I was angry, if I was going to go public, if I was talking to clients. He didn't say any of that outright, but it was all there, in the pauses, in the careful tone. I kept it polite. I told him I had moved on. I wished them well, and I meant it. But the thing is, they hadn't moved on. Because they couldn't. They'd built their restructure on the assumption that results were separate from the people who made them happen. They thought the branch had improved because of metrics, because of systems, because of charts. They forgot that people make those charts possible. And when those people stop believing in you, nothing else holds. As for me, I said yes to the opportunity I'd been offered. Quietly, no announcements, no fanfare. I started fresh, with a blank slate, a small team, and none of the noise. We didn't have a $10 million branch on day one, but we had something better, clarity. And one by one, the calls kept coming. From clients who remembered, from colleagues who wanted in, from people who didn't care about the brand, they cared about the work. What they didn't realize at the time was that by firing me, they had given me something I didn't even know I needed: freedom. Not just from that company, but from the illusion that loyalty is a strategy. It's not. Loyalty is earned in both directions, and once you see that clearly, you never go back. The first week at the new office felt strange. Not because I missed the old one, but because I didn't realize how much of myself I had sacrificed for it. The stress, the second guessing, the constant feeling that someone was looking over my shoulder waiting for me to slip up, it was all gone. The air felt clearer, and the work, for the first time in years, felt light. It started small, a modest team, a few promising accounts, and no unrealistic expectations, just real goals built on mutual respect. I wasn't building a replica of what I had before. I was building something better, something intentional. Clients who had once dealt with me through layers of corporate formality were now talking to me directly. One told me, "I didn't realize how much of our trust was tied to you until you weren't there anymore." That stuck with me, because when I'd been fired, no one had questioned whether I delivered. The results spoke for themselves, but in their eyes I had become inconvenient. I wasn't aligned with the new leadership model. I asked too many questions. I had too much influence. It wasn't personal, but it was political. And that's why I kept things quiet now. No announcements, no gloating, just progress. The first quarter, we beat projections by a comfortable margin. Nothing explosive, just steady growth. But what made it satisfying wasn't the money. It was the people. Some had taken risks to join me, left security behind, and every time we hit a milestone, I saw it in their faces. That quiet validation, that calm certainty that we weren't crazy for walking away. I got word that the old branch had undergone another restructure. That makes 3 since I left. Someone told me they finally split the territory back up, tried to decentralize again. But it was too late. Once trust is gone, you can't rebuild it with org charts. Then came the news I didn't expect. A colleague turned friend messaged me one morning. They're shutting down the branch. Quietly, merging the accounts into other regions. I sat with that for a while, not out of spite. I wasn't happy to hear it. It just felt final. Like a chapter I didn't write the ending to, but still had to read. That branch had been the mess no one wanted. The project dumped in my lap. The risk no one was willing to take. And together, with a team no one had faith in, we'd turned it around. We didn't just hit targets. We made it thrive. And for that, I was removed. It would have been easy to carry bitterness, to let it define the next chapter. But instead I used it. Every new hire I brought on, I asked the same question. What kind of environment do you never want to work in again? Because I knew that if I could answer that, I could build a place worth staying in. 2 years later, I walked into a quarterly meeting and looked around the room. Not a single person there had been with me on day 1, but every single one had chosen to be here. That meant more than any contract. We'd grown beyond what I expected. The team was tight. Revenue was strong. But more importantly, the culture was healthy. No politics, no fear-based leadership, no empty promises. One of my early employees pulled me aside after that meeting and said, "You know, when I first joined, I thought you were too calm for someone who'd been burned like that." I kept waiting for the bitterness to show up. It never did. I smiled. Because here's the thing most people don't realize. The moment you stop trying to get back at them, you win. That branch, they buried it in a quarterly report and pretended it never happened. But I didn't need to remind anyone of what we built. People remembered on their own, quietly, respectfully. One of our biggest clients today is someone who was once told to be patient while corporate figured out how to replace me. They left 6 months after I did. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. I never had to tell them what happened. They saw it. In the end, I didn't need revenge. I didn't need applause. I just needed space to build the kind of place I once wished someone had built for me. And I did. That's the story. That's what came after they let me go, thinking I'd fade quietly into the background. I didn't, They tried to make an example out of me, and they did, but not the one they intended, because the truth always shows up in the results. And when you invest in people, when you protect trust, and when you build with integrity, it doesn't just last, it spreads.